So this all happened with a Declaration of Independence. I declare that I want to be independent. That's exactly what it's saying. This doesn't mean that they're free. You're simply stating, yeah, I want to be free. Think about a breakup letter that you want to send to your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You send them a letter telling that you want to break up, right? So let's look at some of the things that the key elements that you need to focus on when it comes down to the Declaration of Independence. What does it mean? It states the colonial grievances. Remember, the colonial meaning that before United States was United States. Anytime we talk about colonial, we're talking about the 13 colonies. So it states that the colonial grievances meaning that the reasons why you are upset, why I grieve, why I have a problem with you. So the colonial grievances against British rule, which simply states a list of reasons for separating from Great Britain. Just like if you was breaking up with someone, you would give them reasons why you want to break up. It also states, or also it was written by Thomas Jefferson. He was an amazing writer, at the time, and he also quoted from John Locke, but we'll get to that later. It describes a statement of democratic principles rather than a frame of government. It says exactly what needs to be done in order for us to live on, pretty much, is those democratic principles. It doesn't talk about the framework of government at all. It doesn't say, the separation of powers. It doesn't list anything specific about government. It simply states that we need to have these principles. This is the reason why we're breaking up with you. Now, it takes the ideas from John Locke's theory of natural rights. Of course, he used John Locke's research, or his statement rather, to say, hey, you know what? We have natural rights and we all are born with them, and we should live by them, or that you should treat us like such. This is why we're breaking up. It also contributed to the political development of the US by presenting a clear statement of the social contract theory of government. Pretty much. Now, moving on, it also says that it's similar to the Bill of Rights because both documents support the limitations of government power and stress the importance of individual liberty. Now, I know how this may seem confusing, but when we get to government, the government portion or starting a new nation, I'm going to explain to you exactly what they mean by these similar to the Bill of Rights. I don't want to get into the Bill of Rights now because we didn't go over them. Only when we go over them, that's why I want to talk about that rather. So we will definitely talk about this. Lastly, no taxation without representation. Very, very, very important. And what this simply means is saying that you cannot tax us if we're not being represented. For instance, if you think about it, if you was in a small town and there was a bigger town who control your town, and the bigger town decides on a separate meeting that they're going to charge you for whatever, for anything, with stamps and all those type of things that you have to pay. Mind you, there were no representatives from your small town in that big town's meeting to discuss what's happening. So this is the reason why they had this big protest. No taxation without representation. You cannot tax us, pretty much. So many colonists believed that they could not be taxed by British because they had no representation in the British government, which means that the British did not have the consent to govern, right? Now, these are the four main things that the Declaration is about. It has a preamble, which explains why the Continental Congress drew up the Declaration, why we decided that I want to break up with you. Then it says it has the natural rights. Declared that the rights of people to life, liberty, and property. This is what we deserve. This is what I need to. This is what I need to do in order to live on. And then they list their grievances, all the problems that they have with you. Think about if you're breaking up with someone. What are some of the problems that you have? You don't talk to me enough. You don't communicate. You don't take me out anywhere. Blah 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 blah. Those are all grievances. You grieve. Then finally, what's going to be the resolution? I want to finally break up. Or you're simply saying, we declare ourselves free from you, Great Britain. That's exactly what this Declaration of Independence was. It was not saying that they were automatically broken up. Remember, the fighting did not begin yet. This is before the war. So the Declaration of Independence, although we celebrate the Declaration of Independence, we're simply stating or celebrating a statement that was drawn up and submitted um, to Great Britain, saying that I want to break up with you. But that's not, we didn't get our independence not until way later. And this is an example of the protest when they said no taxation without representation. And remember why they were protesting, because of all these taxes that the British hit them with, because of the French and Indian War, that they need to pay back those war debts. So this guy Thomas Paine, right? He writes a book called Common Sense, and the only reason why he called it Common Sense, because he wrote it in a way in which everyone can read it and understand it. He wanted to be common, to mean that the common man should be able to read it and understand it, and the reason why he did that. So he gave reasons for the colonies to want to break up, because remember, and you can't have war without a nation behind you, backing you. So let's say if a few of the people in the colonies wanted war, but a large people of the population didn't, then war probably would never ever happen. So he had to get this message out to people and understand why they want to break up from Great Britain. And I don't know. I'm not sure if you remember our last lesson. We talked about mercantilism, and just to recap, British used this thing called mercantilism, which they took the resources from the colonies that they, whether it was tobacco and sugar, things that they grown and cotton from the 13 colonies, and then they shipped all of that stuff that was grown in the colonies to Europe, or Great Britain rather, more specific. Great Britain takes it, manufactures it, make clothes and all types of things, and then sells it back to the colonies. Now, that's mercantilism at its best. And because they use this system, here was the result. Committees of correspondence was formed. There was a non-importation agreements. Boston Tea Party, that's when they threw out all the tea, and the First Continental Congress. These were all responses to this mercantilist policies, right? All the 13 colonies came up with did all of these things as a response to the mercantilist policies from Great Britain. And although we can't mention the Revolutionary War without mentioning some of the taxes or the acts that occurred within the during the Revolutionary period, the American Revolution. But you really don't need to know what these acts were really about. Just know of them. Know that there was a Sugar and Stamp Act, there was a Carding Act, there was a Townsend Act, there was a Boston Massacre. Just know that these existed. You do not need to know what were the Stamp Act. If this was middle school, then yes, I would ask you to write about them. Tell me, compare and contrast them. But for the Regents exam, just know that they existed. And another more events that led to the Revolutionary War, that it began shortly after the Declaration of Independence. The American colonies win the war, and independence with the help of a familiar land, because they knew they knew the colonies, or they knew the land in which they were fighting. That's why they was able to win. But they didn't win specifically, not until there was a turning point when France came in. It's very, very important. This was like the Battle of Saratoga, where France came in, and that was a huge turning point, because Great Britain, remember, Great Britain was a huge superpower. They were strong in military. So how did small 13 colonies beat or defeat Great Britain? Because France came in and helped. Now here is what I want you to look at. At the end of the Revolutionary War, the Mississippi became a western boundary for the U.S. So remember in our last lesson how a lot of the colonists went into the Ohio River Valley, and the Native Americans were there, and France didn't like that. Then they had this whole French and Indian War type thing. Now, because remember, France now is allies with the colonists now. Say, hey, we're friends now. We're cool. So I'll allow you to go into that territory. So now the cutoff point was the Mississippi River, right? So this was before, of course, the Louisiana Purchase, and we will talk about that. I don't want to confuse any one of you, but this is what became the western boundary point after the Revolutionary War. So it wasn't just a proclamation line anymore. Now the Revolutionary War happened, and now they're America. Now our cutoff point was beyond the Appalachian Mountains and to the Mississippi River. Here's some questions that I like you all to do. Excuse me. Um, in his pamphlet, Common Sense, Thomas Paine urged American colonists to do what? They want to establish his own nation, pay their colonial taxes. Now, come on, who wants to pay taxes? Obey the laws of Parliament. Really? That's why they fighting. Form an alliance with France. Now, they did want to form an alliance with France, but that wasn't why they vote Common Sense. So to establish their own nation. That is the reason why. I hope you all chose to answer choice one. When I look at passages like this, I always look at the author. Right? It's by Thomas Jefferson. So I know it's going to be something about the Declaration. But let's see. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to ensure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute a new government. Of course, we know where that came from, which is the Declaration of Independence. But let's say, for instance, you didn't know that. Let's see. Let's look at answer choices. The purpose of this statement was to do what? Urge support for the Albany Plan of the Union. Remember, the Albany Plan was simply saying that colonies, you're gonna remain colonies, but we're gonna try to negotiate. Great Britain and we're gonna all negotiate, and we can all live happily with you being colonies and me being Great Britain. So you know that's not true. So you can cross out one. Provide justification for declaring independence. Okay, that sounds okay, but let's look at other choices. Criticize the Articles of Confederation. Now, you don't know what the Articles of Confederation is, right? Me either, because we didn't get there yet. That's the reason why. The Articles of Confederation was a first form of government. They didn't have their government yet. They simply say, hey, we're breaking up with you. Advocate the obedience to Great Britain. So we want to obey Great Britain, really, after we fought with them? So the best answer choice here is choice 2, to provide justification for declaring independence. This is the reason why I'm breaking up with you. Here's another question. And these are all Regents questions, by the way. Which two key principles of government are included in the Declaration of Independence? Remember, they're asking for 2 key principles of government. It has to be a principle of government. This is a majority rule and minority rights. I'll tell you this. Minority rights still, well, it exists, but really, don't think about that until the 20th century, okay? Universal suffrage. Suffrage is like right to vote. And judicial independence. Judicial independence. Judicial is like the courts. Courts independence. Definitely not. Direct democracy and equality for women. First of all, equality for women in 1776? I don't think so at all. 4, consent of governed and natural rights. This is absolutely right, simply because, remember, natural rights was inside of the Declaration of Independence. Here's another question. The Declaration of Independence consists of what? Is it a proposal for reuniting the colonies in England? Definitely not. Is it a statement of grievances against the King of England? Remember, did we say it was like a breakup letter? And in the breakup letter, don't you state why you're upset with someone? So maybe, I don't know. Let's see. 3, request for a treaty between the colonies and Spain. I don't think they even mentioned Spain really like that at all. Not during the colonial period. Not during this lesson we didn't. So I wouldn't agree with 3 at all. Plan for organizing the Western Territories. The Western Territories wasn't ours at all. In fact, it belonged to Spain. So I'm looking at 2 as being the best choice here. Statement of grievances against the King of England. That's exactly what it was. And lastly, which set of events related to the early America is in the correct chronological order? So I'm looking at the very first choice. Inauguration of George Washington. That's not the first thing that happened. The Battle of Saratoga. Again, that's when this is the fighting during the Revolution. I don't think so either. So I'm looking at 3. French and Indian War. Now that happened first. The French Indian War. The passage of the Stamp Act. That's true, because remember they wanted to pay for the war debts of the French and Indian War. The Battle of Saratoga. Remember the Battle of Saratoga was a turning point of the Revolutionary War, and the inauguration of George Washington. I like answer choice 3, but let's look at 4. Passage of the Stamp Act. That would not be the first thing before the French and Indian War. So 3 is the best choice here.